And Brad, I've kind of hijacked the agenda for today.
You're good. You can take it from here if you want to.
Okay.
Are we still waiting on folks to come in, or how are we doing?
Yeah, we're getting there. I might give us a couple minutes, but
Sure.
I invited Brad today, or I invited Matt today. I'm all confused now. I invited Matt to come and talk to us just a little bit and give a little update on where we're at. I think we've had some conversations about different proposals that have been floated out there, different combinations of proposals, the TCG study. And so I've asked Matt to kind of come and give a synopsis of where we are currently.
Yeah, hello everybody. Matt Smith, interim superintendent, and so I was able to join the last meeting, maybe not even for its entirety, but at least for a little bit of it. So I just kind of want to give you an update. What's happened since then is there obviously was a lot of frustration on the TCG report, and I also heard that there was not a lot of confidence that a lot of options are being explored other than a TCG option. So we went back and worked to try to build out some more options to see what's available and what's not, and ended up sort of landing on 5 options. And I don't know, is Catherine Beacon on this call, Kathy?
Hi, Matt. Good to see
there you
everyone.
Are. Hey, Kathy. Catherine, how are you? So if there's questions about, some of the 5 options, Catherine can certainly speak to that with much more granularity than I can. But there was basically 5 options, and one of the options, which I know is not the popular option, is that nothing changes, right? And I know that that's probably not what folks want to hear, but of the 5, that is one of the options, including one of the TCGs, which also is not what people want to hear. So hi, Blake. So we're talking about some of these options. The problem is each of them takes time. And I know that that's also not the most popular answer right now. I will tell you that based on our, which I think folks know, based on our fiscal reality as a district and over the last few years of losing enrollment, and this year right now, before we get to the October 1st deadline, that trend continues of losing enrollment. And right now it's a fairly significant amount of enrollment loss. And so that is, as we all know, going to be a fiscal hit to our general fund dollars and our budget for next year. So what I'm going to tell you right now is if you are looking to make a decision based on whether or not the district is going to do anything, I don't see that the district is going to be doing anything to change the contributions to the DMTRS. I just don't see a fiscal possibility that is going to be an option for us to move forward, because it's going to be too much of a hit to our general fund budget. I say that really because what's the phrase Brene Brown uses? Clear as kind. I'm trying to be really, really kind. I don't want to give anybody the runaround at all. I know a lot of folks have worked really, really hard for many, many years on trying to get something done. I don't see that being an option right now fiscally for Des Moines Public Schools to move forward with anything. I just want to put that out there right now. If there's something that can be done, it's going to take a little bit more time to pull some numbers together to see what's available. I just honestly, I can't do anything right now with the budget the way it is and the way it's going to be for next year. So I just want to do that and just let you know that that's where it is right now. If there's questions about the 5 options that are being explored, there's been several rocks that have been turned over around what that looks like and what it sounds like. Again, Catherine can give more specifics if there's questions about that and far more accurate answers than I can. Are there questions that possibly that I can answer for you right now? If not, I can try to get an answer for you and then maybe come back.
We did a quick summary of the 5 options that were explored.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say.
Yep. Catherine, can you give a quick summary? And just a quick caveat, I can be here for a little bit longer, and then I need to go to a community event just down the road here in just a second.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just pulling that up. First of all, as Matt said, option 1 is to take no action. that is the only option of the 5 that doesn't involve district money being used in some way, shape, or form. Option 2 is terminating DMTRS. That means everyone would be vested, and all assets would need to be distributed from the plan. It would also require an IRS determination letter and time to actually go through that process. There's expenses associated with the termination process. Option 3 is transferring some or all participants over to IPERS. We did have a conversation with IPERS. IPERS will take groups of people without service credits. IPERS will not allow.
Catherine, you just became muted.
I apologize. That was me. Sorry about that. I was trying to mute the
Hey.
rest of the call.
Not a problem. Sometimes that's good for me to get muted, so not a problem at all. Option 3 was to transfer some or all participants to IPERS. We had a call with IPERS. They're willing to accept groups of DMTRS participants as if they were new hires, so without the service credits. But IPERS will not permit individual elections, meaning that the plan would have to say, as an example, everyone hired after 2011 moves over, or everybody under 45 moves over. And we discussed how we might draw lines to determine what groups to move over. And because of the nature of DMTRS, in those groups, there would be some people that would benefit from moving and starting over in IPERS, and other people that would be impacted negatively, and there was not a desire to do anything that would negatively impact someone. Option 4 was the TSA option that's been discussed previously, providing additional benefits just to DMTRS participants to supplement the existing program. And option 5 was a combination of any of the above options, which, as an example, may look like moving some folks over to IPERS and providing other folks with TSA. That's just an example. I know it's a very high level view, and it sounds like there's been some other discussions about the mechanics of those options, but as far as what was considered, those were the 5 ideas.
And when you say participants, you mean actives?
Correct.
And Jessica, to further clarify that, they mean active actives. So the
That's a
inactive
good
actives
clarification.
would, yeah. You know,
Gotcha.
because we have such unique terminology, so. Blake?
As we think about those 5 options, and you know, Mr. Smith, I think, was clear there in guidance and direction. Is there an option 6? Are we still considering offering the retirement incentive above and beyond what is currently on the table, which has 1 week for people to sign up?
There's not been a discussion about offering an additional retirement incentive beyond what's already been discussed. Sorry, Blake, good question. I should have answered it the first time.
Barb?
I have a question about option number 2. If the plan was terminated, what does that mean for retirees?
Yeah, so current benefits that you're owed, when a plan terminates, they all become due. Nothing else, there's no additional accrual, nothing that is going to continue to accumulate in the future occurs, but anything that you're owed, like as of today, would be due to you in a lump sum.
So that So retirees would just be getting a lump sum of money and they would no longer get their monthly benefit?
If the plan is terminated.
I just would have some concerns about that as well as the other retirees, I'm sure. There's 800 of us and that's a significant concern. I'll just say that for our group.
Mr. Smith, can I ask what, and I know that there's not a perfect answer here, but what is the timeline that you see being maybe reasonable as we look at some of these other options? Because what I want to do is to think about addressing for DMTRS. I think there's a couple of groups. There's this immediate group that has been sort of maybe sitting on the fence for the retirement, whether they're thinking they want to go or not. And it sounds like kind of what we're saying is that we may not have anything clear and concrete, certainly not by September 15th, but there may not be just anything else for those folks that are close to retirement. And so if you're in that situation, it sounds like you kind of need to do the math, look at the conditions of your life and sort of be making those decisions and not assume that there may be something else. So I feel like that's one group. And if I just said something wrong, although I see you shaking your head, I think that the second part though is for employees, and I'm going to use myself as an example. At what point do you feel like there'll be a decision about any sort of change that can occur? Knowing that, I hear the message about, budget constraints, and although I will push back, but this is not the time for that conversation. I think being able to do nothing, I hope that's viewed as an unreasonable act. But on behalf of people like me who may say, you know what, I'm in a situation where I need to know whether anything is going to change in this pension, because staying does not have benefits for me financially. It hurts me to continue. And so when can folks expect that we may have something more concrete?
Yeah, I think that's a super fair question. And here's my honest wrestle in answering is, I don't know. I would really love to tell you and be super confident that if you just, if you give me 6 more months, we'll have a better answer for you. That would be an insincere and inaccurate answer, because I truly don't know when there would be the right time to maybe look at one of these options being super viable. I'd be lying, Blake, if I told you that there's just hang on for another year and this is going to happen. I just don't see that. Doesn't mean that it's not true. I don't see it, and I would feel super dishonest if I gave you an answer, to be honest with you.
What are some variables you would need to see improve in order to speak more confidently? Is it like an enrollment issue or a funding issue, that those kind of things need to shore up before you can?
It is. Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. And so we're not quite obviously to October 1st, which is our certified enrollment date. The trend right now, though, is, we're looking at over the last couple of years, a couple of thousand student loss in enrollment, which is not insignificant when it comes to obviously our funding. So.
Yeah, and I think my follow-up would be, as we look at these options, what I would like to know as an advisory board member so that I can help the process is, what information are we still lacking? How do we get the information that we need so that as we work through these, we can say, okay, this is what we need to know about option 1. And that's not a good one because that's the do nothing. But I do think we need to weigh out the pros and the cons, because I understand probably as well as many, appreciate the issue with budget. However, there is an impact of doing nothing. There are negative pieces there, and there are positives. The district, and again, but as we go through these 5 options, what are we missing? How do we get it? And then how do we clearly cross the bridge of making the decisions, to say, here we are, and it's just out. That one is just off the table. We're not coming back down that road. Because I feel like we've struggled with that over the last 3 years is we kind of start over the bridge and then we kind of feel like there's some momentum and then the bridge gets just blown up underneath us. And then we go back to the other side and we rebuild a new bridge and then it gets blown up again. And for me as a committee, I think we need some stability of what is needed, what is missing, how do we get it? And then how do we evaluate and how do we support the process that you want to use, Mr. Smith, in doing this so that we have a part and don't render this committee somewhat useless and kind of worthless? Because I will tell you in my 3 years, that has been my experience, is that this committee hasn't been given a utility that I believe is clearly defined by our plan document.
Yeah, so I think the question is what's needed, like what's missing, right? So to I believe it was Barb's point earlier around eliminating the plan altogether. That option that's not a viable option. I mean, it's an option that's on the table. That's not something I can advocate for. I'll just go ahead and tell you. So that leaves us right down to 4. There's the hybrid option. I don't know if that's how Catherine sort of interpreted it in our summary, but that hybrid option has potential legs to it. I'll tell you that. And the reason I'm still hesitant in actually even vocalizing that, because the variables that requires in order to see those legs come to fruition, it is dependent on enrollment. It is dependent on general fund. It is dependent on our budget, and our budget is on a steady decline. And that is actually, there's no light at the end of that tunnel as of today. That's not actually going to change, and there's going to be a negative impact on our general fund dollars by utilizing that hybrid option, right? So if I were to rank order them, so to speak, right in the top 2, where I sit right now from my position in my role and recognizing that I've got a board guardrail around not unnecessarily risking district assets. Option 1 of keep the pension as it is, that's the best of all the worst decisions to be able to make. Option 2 would be, if I were to rank order them, that hybrid option, to see if there's something that we could do with potentially moving some folks to IPERS and then doing something for the remaining DMTRS participants. But that requires a district contribution into that I don't see as a viable option because of the impact it has on our general fund to serve kids today.
Can you explain how moving people to IPERS, how that impacts the general fund? I guess I don't understand that.
That necessarily wouldn't. That impact actually was with the DMTRS folks that remain in DMTRS that are not eligible to move, and increasing their contributions.
What if though we just did move people to IPERS that could move to IPERS, that doesn't cost the district much, and then you continue offering the early retirement incentive, which would be management levy funds, so that doesn't affect the general. Those 2 things don't affect the general fund budget. Yeah.
So thank you, Jen. One of the things, correct me if I'm wrong, Catherine or Kathy or Shashank, one of the attributes around continuing to offer early retirement, while I could actually possibly legally say, yeah, we're going to continue to do that, the board can't actually commit to that because the board turns over and they can't legally say that we're going to continue to offer that year after year after year. They might be able to get away with 1 or 2 years, but beyond that's not a guarantee that can be offered in terms of an early retirement incentive. Catherine, did I capture that, or Kathy, accurately? I think I did, but I just want to double check.
You did.
You did. Yes, you did.
I think there's a couple other hands up here. Jessica, you had your hand up.
Yep, I was going to say the same thing that Brad said and the same thing that Blake said, so I took my hand down.
Okay. And then I see a guest hand up, Judy.
Yes, I would like to go back to that eliminating. I just want you to understand that a lot of us did take the option till death. So if you just end it, there's no payout for the rest of us and we have no more retirement fund, period. So I was glad, Matt, to hear you say you are not looking at that one.
Yes, ma'am.
The 401A option still under consideration, or I think last time this group got together as a larger group, there was a discussion around a 401A plan sort of being supplementary.
Yeah, so it is in that hybrid option, Brad, but not necessarily as TCG presented it, if that makes sense. I think there was a lot of maybe some questions about that. But in that hybrid option, that 401 is part of that, would be part of that configuration.
So I think in Catherine's 5 options, one of the options was a supplemental plan.
Okay.
And then one option was to move people to IPERS, and then the combined option 5 was a combination of that. And I think when Matt says there was some concern over the TCG study, I think, you know, we were aiming at income replacement in that study. And I think we all kind of questioned some of the numbers perhaps that were presented in that statement and study. So if we went that route, there would definitely need to be some verification of numbers. And so in the more immediate future, maybe going back to our original look at the 401A of a flat percentage, or, you know, moving everybody to X contribution level, or one of those variations.
Okay, so to sum up, what I'm getting is that there are really 2 options that are fiscally possible, but only if things get better. And that is nothing changes, or a combination of transferring some people to IPERS and a TSA option for those that can't transfer. But that would require a budget. And we can't say when that could happen because we don't know what the budget will reveal. Is there anything that this committee can do except wait?
I think that's a great question. And honestly, my answer to that, I don't think there is anything this committee could do right now except wait. And what we would be waiting on is to know what would be the financial cost to the district in that hybrid model, knowing what our budget process is coming about right now, and knowing what the impact is going to be not only for FY24 but FY24 and beyond. There is nothing to do to wait. Maybe I'm missing something, Catherine or somebody else, Shashank, but I don't see that. But I
wasn't trying to put you on the spot there, but
no,
here's my question then. I know that one of the things that we said in transferring some or all of the participants is that we can't have individual election, that we must have a rule for who is in the group that gets transferred. Is that something the district would decide based on budgetary constraints, or is that something that this committee could discuss?
Well, that's a good question. And I think the answer might be both. I think that could be something that the committee could discuss, as long as it's not going to put the district financially at risk in our general fund.
And Matt, to piggyback on that, and Catherine, correct me if I misstate this, but one of the concerns is that we have to, at minimum, look at what the requirements are for the number of people who can move over without jeopardizing our plan status and having a partial plan termination. So we can't have any more than 20% maximum move over. And then of those 20%, we would need to do an actuarial study to make sure that we aren't doing harm to any of those individuals, because if there's harm done, you know, we can't obviously do a plan move. So, you know, if that's something that this committee wants, is for us to embark on that actuarial study and kind of define some groups, we can do that. If we're going to go that route, I think, you know, it's prudent to do the actuarial study and get it started now. If it's not something at all that we're entertaining, then I don't want to do and take up plan assets by paying an actuary to do the study.
Right, I got you, Kathy. But I think having that in place may be helpful. If the hybrid is the number 2 option, if there's room in the budget, if that's then we need to know who it is that we would be moving and who we could afford to move. At 20%, that sounds like it'd be all the folks under 45 that would fit into that group. I think hiring after 2011 will not work because we have people who retired from other districts who joined us then later that wouldn't necessarily fit into that, and they couldn't be in IPERS simply because they already retired with IPERS. So I don't think that hiring after 2011 will work, but certainly hiring somebody under a particular age may be effective as a discriminator. But we need to probably do that study so that when we're ready to move, we can move. If we just sit and wait, then when we finally get to a point we can do something, then by the time we get the study done, another barrier will have popped up. We've been down this road so many times. We know that's the pattern. So I think it's better for us to have some forward motion in some way, like this is the option, this is how it's going to look, this is what it will look like. And then if and when monies become available, we enact it instead of continuing to wait until money becomes available, because that's just not how government funding works.
And Jessica, I have identified a group of individuals to have the actuary start looking through to see if a move would be an advantageous thing or detrimental to them. So we can, we can start on that process. So we're ready.
Yeah, I was going to follow up. I actually thought that process had already started. And so if I'm incorrect in any of that, Mr. Smith, Ms. McKay, Mr. Aurora, when we met, I actually thought that was one of the pieces of data that we said we were going to assume going forward. Now, if you need the authorization of this committee, then we need to put that on the next agenda and get that out as quickly as we possibly can. My question is moving, I'm just going to use, let's just say it's one person. It would be more than that, but is moving a person from DMTRS over to IPERS, do you all consider that to be a budget liability? Because we keep talking about budget. And I get that. I also want to challenge all of us to go back and understand what the trust document states, what the trust document defines. Because if this conversation is only one-sided about the district budget, we may be pushing some boundaries that are not really great in terms of understanding the trust, the definition of the trust, and the obligations of all of us as the trustees of this plan. This can't be a one-sided where it's only about benefiting and or not harming the district. We've got to also look on the other side that we're not doing things that are harming the DMTRS plan members. And I think we've made pretty solid cases for identifying those pieces. But my question is, would moving people over to IPERS be identified as a budget impact? Is there a negative view to that?
I don't know that I could give the accurate answer to that. I'd have to look to Kathy, Shashank, or Catherine.
I think like there would be a cost associated with it based on what each individual that's moving over, what their current district contribution is versus what their new district contribution would be. So, I mean, there's definitely a cost associated with it.
And I think that that's in itself is part of the problem here, is that we're not identifying where there's an actual savings to the district because of having someone in DMTRS. And now we're turning around and potentially viewing that, well, if we have to move them to IPERS, just as we would hire any other employee and give them the 9.44%, that we're viewing that as a negative cost. If all the DMTRS people tomorrow quit and you had to rehire them all, they would all have to go into IPERS. And that for me is a real struggle. Like, I understand the conversation to say, going to a 10%, a 10.5%, or 11% line, viewing that and saying that there's a cost, but saying moving someone from 8% to 9.4, which is what we're providing to every other employee who's in IPERS, I really struggle with that. I think for me, I'm going back to that element of, are we finding the balance between what the DMTRS members need as defined by the trust, but also balancing where the district budget is in the operation of this plan?
Yeah, and I think that's a fair statement, Blake, and I think that's why that option 2 is still considered in the top 2, because there's definitely a desire to move off this dime. And I know that, at least I understand that that's where this committee has been for several years, is to move off this dime and do something that's going to benefit our DMTRS employees, both actives and retirees, and it's just got to be something that is not going to negatively impact the student experience. And I know by saying that, it sounds like I'm okay with potentially negatively impacting staff experience. That's actually not what I'm trying to communicate, and I don't believe that at all. I want everybody to have the best experience possible, and I want to make sure that we're continuing to put forth all the resources in front of our kids that we're serving today and next year and the year after that, to make sure that we can continue to do that with a viability and vitality based on the budget that we have and the declining enrollment that, again, is not insignificant. We're not talking about 100 kids. I know we're talking about thousands, and that's going to be significant for us. That sounds like an excuse. It doesn't. Budget's not the only thing, right? It's not what drives districts. It's what funds districts, but it's not what drives folks. And it's certainly not something I say lightly. And the impact of what I'm telling you is it's not that it's not lost on me that I know it's not what you want to hear.
It's zero sum, right? I mean, if you're putting money into the fund, you're taking it out of teacher salaries or other student experiences, and so, nothing is free, right? If you don't have
right,
growth,
it's nothing's free, right? And
if you don't have growth
agreed.
to fund it, then it's zero sum, right? Or worse. So
in some cases, yes.
yeah. So you could say, like, you benefit teachers by increasing benefits, but then that's got to come out of teacher salaries. Maybe you have fewer teacher jobs, or salaries are flat for a period of time. It's no
Agreed.
win, but it's a hard situation, right? So
it is, and what I'm not doing a really good job of is expressing the empathy for each of you in the situation that everybody's in. And I don't know how to express that level of empathy without also sounding like it's an excuse. And so I'll just say it. It's not meant to sound like an excuse. It's the reality that we're in fiscally. And I honestly, I'm not just trying to sound bleak, because I'm a very glass half full person. Financially, that light is very dim, looking to the future of funding public schools. And our decreased enrollment is going to contribute and exacerbate that reality. And that doesn't help the situation right now. I want to keep the option 2 definitely on the table, but I also don't want to string folks along and say, hey, it's coming, it's going to happen. I can't do that. I would be so dishonest if I said that that's a real possibility for us, and I can't do that with integrity.
by option 2, do you mean transfer some participants over to IPERS?
Yes, sir. Sorry about
Okay.
that. Yeah,
I think
sorry.
option 2 was terminate the plan. That was alarming
Sorry,
a lot
yeah,
of people.
option 2, the hybrid option. Sorry. Good catch, Brad.
I liked Jessica's comment earlier around maintaining momentum. I think in the past several years, for sure, we've absolutely let perfect be the enemy of good and had positive things brought to this committee, and we've made proposals that would improve the fiscal situation for teachers, and we've said no, it's not good enough, and that's only set us back. So I want to echo the sentiment that Jessica was sort of promoting, to say, if there are ways to maintain momentum to improve the situation, even if marginally, even if it's a short-term gain and it's not perfect, let's explore that vigorously. Because, for a long time, we've always said this option's not good enough, we need to do more. And the situation's only gotten worse. We've made no progress, and now there's less room than ever for making the situation better. And so any momentum we can maintain, we got to charge forward.
Very well said, Brad.
I hear that. This conversation certainly doesn't have to end, but I have to end mine so I can get to this community meeting on time. Thank y'all.
Thanks for joining.
You bet. I will talk to you soon. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Matt.
Appreciate your honesty.
Have a good day.
Are there any further questions regarding this portion of the discussion? If not, we can move on to the excess earnings and the interest component of our agenda. think I see Judy's hand still up. Judy, do you have an additional question?
No, I do not have. I'm sorry, I did not get it off,
That's okay.
but it doesn't want to seem to go off, so.
That's
sorry.
okay. I have put in the chat a file with the excess earnings and the interest. I will also, if I can get this to work, I've been having computer issues. Share on my screen here. Okay. Everybody see that? So excess earnings have been calculated, and if you look down to the bottom of this sheet, it lists out the excess earnings for each group. So group B is 7%, C 4%, D 1%, and group E is 13%. And those will be effective on the October check. This will go to the board for approval on the next board meeting, which I believe the date is the 20th. So that was part, and I do apologize for the very short notification of this meeting, but that was part of the short notification was so I could get this in front of you prior to it going on the board agenda. So this committee could see that. The next piece to that is the interest rate that will be applied to the accounts. Whoops. And this year's interest rate will be at 5.6%. Last year was 5.2, and the year previous to that was 5.5. And again, that will all go to the board for approval. Blake, I see your hand raised. You're muted, Blake.
Sorry, I'm in 2 meetings simultaneously and they kicked me out of one spot because I was talking too much. So I got moved out to the hallway. My question is one that is probably not going to come quickly. A Bankers Trust team is, we've talked a lot about how we've changed our investment mixture from the 70, 30, 80, 20, 90, 10. One of the things I'd like to know is if we can see how is shifting from 70, 30 had an impact on our overall interest that we've earned in the plan. And really what I'm getting at is if we would have been at an 80-20, would we have seen a different number than 5.6? Would it have been higher or lower? If we would have still been at 90-10, would we have seen the number higher or lower? And the reason I pose that, or I want that question, is that, you know, we talk a lot about the struggles within this plan and the potential growth. We hear a lot about that shifting the investment is going to create more harm and risk. I'd like to know, can we actually get a sense and see what was the harm and risk there? Where did we land and where would we have been? That may help us to engage in a conversation about whether changes need to be made going forward to the investment policy that still provides that balance, but also maybe potential for more growth, which benefits both active and retired members.
So, Blake, this is Alan Goody at BTC. John's really the expert on the mechanics of what you're talking about, but I'll address it. And then if you still have questions, let me know, and I can discuss it with John. He's out sick, but I can discuss it with John, and we can get back to everyone with an email answer. So, but for today, see if this suffices. So, increasing the equity weight or the maximum equity weight from 20% to 30% as we did. My apologies, I've got three or four computer screens here and my camera's right there, but I've got data up here over here. So, but I'll look at this screen right here. So the benefit of that, it's hard to quantify exactly how that benefited, or, you know, is that leading to more of a distribution for you? It's difficult to quantify that. What I will say is that in down years, it increases the To the extent that we harvest gains in up years, we will harvest more gains or be able to harvest more gains in up years, like last year, for example, with an equity allocation that's near 30% compared to if it was only near 20%. And we did harvest significant gains in, I think it was August of last year, about 4 months before the equity market declined. So for example, we hadn't, and I think it was a couple $1 million of equity gains that we harvested, locked in, realized, however you want to, whatever you want to call it. And if we hadn't done that in August, and let's say we had waited till March or April of this year, possibly we wouldn't have been able to realize or lock in as much gain. So having a larger equity weight, although it does increase the risk in the portfolio, meaning the overall portfolio value goes down more when the equity market goes down because of that larger equity weight. When the equity market goes up, we have more gains that we can harvest. And how does that benefit you? That helps us support, we don't deliberately do this, but we harvest gains as just a general process of managing the portfolio. And part of those gains are distributed out to the participants. And if we had a smaller equity weight and we had fewer gains to harvest, at least theoretically, and this is where it gets difficult to quantify, theoretically, we would have harvested fewer gains and the distribution would have been less. It's hard to say how much less, but it would be theoretically less with a smaller equity weight. And last year, and I'm doubling back a little bit, but last year, for example, in August in harvesting, again, I think it was around $2 million. If the equity weight wasn't as big, we may have harvested less. We may not have been as aggressive in harvesting gains. So overall, what it does, having a higher equity weight allows us to harvest bigger gains, and that supports not only a larger payout, but also a larger distributions, but the continuation of the larger distributions, because in the plan, there's a provision where I believe that the gains that are realized, that's smoothed over 3 years. So the total gains for 3 years is averaged, and then the payout in the current year is based on that 3-year average. So in essence, larger equity weight supports continuation of the payout, but it doesn't guarantee anything. And then on top of it too, something to keep in mind is that I believe the plan language is such that the payouts aren't unlimited. They're limited. So no matter how much in gains we might see fit to realize, only a certain amount in any given year is going to be distributed, and the rest of it will be retained to support the funding status of the portfolio, of the plan, for example. So questions or thoughts on any of that? I can expand on that if I can, but I might have to go back to John with questions on this.
Can I try a simpler way of thinking about this that might get to what Blake is asking? So I think Blake's asking if we had more equities, would our returns be higher? Or if we had fewer equities, would they be lower or higher or what? Just thinking like you're looking at Russell 2000 total return over the last 5 or so years has been over 6%. And so if we would have had, more aggressive tilt towards equities, you'd have more volatility over like a 3, 4, 5 year horizon. But that 5.5, 5.2, 5.6 would likely be marginally higher, not life-changingly higher, but you'd have a couple, 10, 20, 30 basis points of return each year. Now, if you were to look at that, at the bottom of the COVID peak or the valley, that number would look much worse because the Russell was down a lot during that time. So it's really kind of a point in time thing. I think the markets are fairly priced right now. They've been higher recently. They've been lower recently. But more volatility, marginally higher return is maybe the way to think about that. And
Mike,
I
did
also
that
think
address your question?
I mean, I'd still like to see as much comparative data, given that whenever this conversation has occurred about possibly changing the investment it feels often like we spend a lot of time on the potential risk side. And as I'm looking at things over the last couple of years, and certainly the market has been about as roller coastery as possible, it seems like the movement that we've made to the 70-30 has not harmed the plan. It doesn't seem like we're putting a jeopardy towards, potential budgetary pieces down the line. And those are the parts that I want to be able to address and speak to, so that if there is a discussion about, is there another movement that makes sense that we can look at and really talk about as we went from 90-10 to 80-20 to 70-30? Has there been this, oh my gosh, or have we actually found that because we still have, there's a large, asset allocation here, it still needs to and will be around for decades as we have young members in the plan. And even those that are retired, they're going to live 20, 30, 40, 50 more years. I just am trying to find that balance, especially given where the conversation went earlier, which it sounds like possibilities of cash infusion just may not happen. And so is there some balance that we can find? And, it doesn't sound like a lot, but, a return rate that is averaging 5.5 versus 6% is actually pretty impactful. When you start compounding interest for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, it's not an insignificant amount of money.
Yep.
I know as I look at my own account, it literally, that 0.5% would literally cut my pension gap by almost 30%. Just at the snap. And so to me, is there a balance there that we stop and say, you know what, maybe this makes some sense, that we need to have that conversation and feel confident in the movement? And this is just my opinion or perspectives. It felt like we've always been drowned in the negative, the risk, the bad. And at some point, I want us to find some balance and some risk that we can actually take in a reasonable way to help actives.
So a couple of thoughts there. I mean, you're right that, 10, 20, 30 basis points compounded over several years, as you can repeat that performance decade after decade, it definitely adds up, and it's very attractive, right? If you're looking to kind of understand the simple math, and this is as simple as I can kind of make it, if you have like a recent report from the BTC folks that kind of lay out, like, here are the different indexes that we track, they have returns listed on those, right? Of like last year, year to date, longer term horizon, right? And they've got allocation to those. So it's 90, 10, 80, 20, whatever. Just go ahead and fiddle with those allocations, do the weighted average to get to like what your return could be, and look at it over different horizons. If you have good performance recently, increasing your equity allocation will look great. If you have bad performance recently, it'll look worse. I think the dynamic you have to be really careful about in pension plans, especially when you have a big mix of actives and retirees that tilts more towards the retirees, is that the overall health of the plan is, potentially damaged in an irreparable way if we have an overexposure to equities. There's a drawdown in equity values, but the retirees still have to get their checks, right? And so, say in a normal year, retiree outflows are 5% of total plan assets. Well, if the market goes down by 40%, and we're all invested in equities, take that 5%, divide it by 0.6, and then you've increased like the drawdown in the account value of the plan just based on like the guaranteed payments. You've almost doubled it, right? And so that's kind of the trap that you run into, where I agree long-term investing is the way to think about this on an individual basis. But when you have kind of assets all in one pool and you have guaranteed outflows coming from that, that's where equities get to be really dangerous, and why pension plans have allocations to them, but they're really cautious about it, because you are really sensitive to like when those cash flows, those outflows that are guaranteed to retirees occur. And that can really damage the long-term health of the plan, because you can't get that money back to invest again. Right. So I agree with the concepts that you're laying out there, Blake. I do think pension plans designed like this one, where all the assets are in a pool, there's a new dynamic that you have to kind of pull into your calculus there that can make equities dangerous in the short term. But otherwise, I agree with everything you're saying to an extent. Does that resonate with anybody, or could I say that more clearly? Or
Yeah,
Anybody
I'm
disagree?
getting you. I'm just thinking, greater returns is better for everyone, but it comes with greater risk, which is harder when we have 800 retirees and only 120 actives. And so I'm getting what you're saying. A higher return though would be better for everyone.
Yep.
But it
But
comes with that risk.
Yeah.
And the
Also,
risk,
you have this
the
really
risk is
weird
really
thing
to
with
the district.
DMTRS where higher returns are also shoveled out to the retirees, and the actives don't get to keep all those gains of the long-term allocations equities, right, through excess earnings, right? And so there's sort of a cap or a soft cap or a participation limiter on what the actives can benefit from increased equity allocations, because a lot of it gets shoveled out to the retirees through excess earnings. Not speaking on the validity or equity of that. It's just sort of the dynamic that actives are up against. And
Yeah,
so
that's a very fair comment.
if you're the
yeah.
actives thinking about this, your upside is limited with an increased equity allocation, and your downside is maybe worse because of that sort of timing dynamic with the retirees and their guaranteed payments. Retirees, I'm not meaning to vilify your role in this. It's just sort of how the plan is designed and what we're up against here. Just like with declining enrollment being a budget concern for the district, shutting off the inflow of actives either naturally or by force like we did creates or enhances these dynamics, and it just makes us have to be more cautious about all of this. So that's where when we're talking about, I don't know, private equities are challenging, or sorry, public equities are challenging, but if you get into like more liquid asset classes that have less of that valuation issue, that's where that can be more attractive to pension plans. Is if you're like in real estate, for example, better returns, still some risk there, but less likely to have some of that like short-term volatility that you have on public equities. But I don't know, I'm getting into the weeds here, but hopefully this mini dissertation has been helpful. Barb, do you want to bring us up a level?
I
question?
know, I actually just had a totally different question. With
Thank you.
interest rates rising, how is that impacting our bonds is a question I have.
Yeah, it leads to a reduction in the market value of the bonds, as Brad just indicated. But the losses aren't realized unless we need to sell anything. And we rarely need to, I don't know the last time we sold anything. Jeff Beardsley, who is our lead fixed income portfolio manager, I believe he is on this call. If he still is, I know he could only be on for a limited time, but Jeff, are you still on the call?
Yes, I am.
So I think you heard the first part of my answer, Jeff. Do you have anything to add about interest rates and how it's affecting the portfolio? To answer Barb's question?
Yeah, as Ellen said, we don't trade heavily in and out of the portfolio, obviously, because it has a good yield and we want to sustain that yield. And, we would trade out if there was a credit issue, but interest rates have risen. And when interest rates rise, the value of the portfolio goes down. Now, reinvestment. Yes, we do have opportunities to reinvest at this point at a much higher yield than we did a year ago, closer to a rate that is above what the current portfolio is earning on a book yield basis. So that will be additive over time to the income component.
So, Jeff, just a quick thought. Bonds in general, and I know it depends on the type of bond and the maturity and the credit quality, but 10-year treasuries, for example, as of today, is that trading around a little over 3%? And this time last year it was 100 to 1 to 1.5% lower. So not that we're exclusively buying treasuries, you're buying all sorts of bonds, but in general, anything you would buy, is it about 1% to 1.5%, or 1.5% to 2% higher than what you could get at the same time last year? What's a fair increase? 1.5% to 2.5% better today than what you could get last year this time?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So, there's increased yield. It's not 100. It's not going to get you all the way to your goal, but definitely yields are a lot better, and that's benefiting the portfolio significantly on anything that matures and we reinvest.
Yeah.
That's anything
yeah.
else, Barb, on that?
Nope. Nope, that's good, thanks.
Okay. Got it.
Any further questions on the excess earnings and the interest rate? Okay, hearing none. I don't have the agenda in front of me. I thought there was one more thing I had on there. But there is something that I need to talk to this committee about, and I have just noticed that the annual meeting is on our calendar for October, and I'm having this panicked feeling as to communication and how we're going to do the annual meeting. Is it in person? Is it virtual? What's our plan? Is October 9th or whatever that date was, October might be still the viable date for it? I just want to make sure that I know what the plan is, and then how we plan to do the election of committee members, because that was something we talked about taking place, at least some kind of discussion of that during annual meeting. And so the committee members are not currently going to the board like they normally would this time of year. We're waiting until we do that next step. And I don't remember where we landed. So somebody please help me, and I will then get on this as quickly as I possibly can.
I think we talked about having both an in-person and virtual. And then we also talked about sending out postcards for people to, nominate.
Mhm.
Anybody else remember any of that?
Yes.
I know we talked about nominations, but I couldn't remember if we were nominating at annual meeting or if we were nominating prior to annual meeting.
Well, at this point, it's got to be at annual meeting because it's September 8th. And in order for us to get all of our act together, we'd have to do the nomination at the annual meeting.
Yeah, annual meeting is scheduled for October 19th. Nothing has been formally announced. I guess what I'm asking is I can send out the beginning of the week information about annual meeting and information about it being online and in person. If that is truly the date we want to utilize, or do we think it would be better to move it 2 weeks out and do a nomination process prior to? I just don't know that we're going to get much if I send out postcards of nominations.
I think the only concern is just that not everybody comes to the annual meeting either to be, a part of that.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I'm not real sure what the answer is.
I just want you guys to get the representatives and have the opportunity to have nominations, and not just, oh, well, there wasn't anybody there, so the 2 people that threw their name in the hat are the 2 people that won. But I'm not sure how to generate that interest to get those nominations. We historically have not had great luck. It's been more word of mouth of, hey, I have somebody in the retiree group, or I have somebody in the active group that's interested, and so we'll put them on the ballot. Go ahead, Lola.
Well, just a thought. We had talked about, well, several thoughts running through my head. We talked about going ahead and sending out the postcards. It alerts people to we're doing this year. We haven't for a while. Also, that's an opportunity to put out the annual meeting time too, unless you were going to do that separately. I just think, as Barb said, I just think that all members need to feel like they've been contacted, at least been in the know. And we had said around something, nominations for the DMTRS candidates would begin on the 7th, and that's when that would open. And then I imagine we're thinking then they end on the annual meeting, and is the annual meeting where the candidates would present their reasoning for wanting to run. We talked about that last time too.
I'm not sure when the cutoff date would be, because you'd need to cut off prior to annual meeting so those candidates know who they are to come to annual meeting, or at least be available via electronic format to present their platform. So, I mean, I can send something out right now. I mean, it can go out on Monday, a postcard announcing, you know, annual meeting and asking them to submit nominations. And I think I'm just going to put on there to submit nominations and give my email address, because I think that's much more efficient than having them send something back in. And then whoever we get in as nominations, I can contact them directly and ask them if they would be comfortable presenting something small at annual meeting. If they aren't comfortable doing a presentation, if they can send me something written and I will read it on their behalf, that's fine as well. And then we can begin voting at annual meeting if we want. I can have ballots there with those individuals' names and then send out ballots following annual meeting. So it's going to be a process that we probably won't have wrapped up until mid-November, the election process, but I think it's important to do it.
Yeah, I agree.
Another question. So are you planning on putting out a letter to all the members regarding the earnings rate and excess earnings before October 1st?
I'm planning to do it, but it won't go out until after the board meeting on September 20th, because I can't send it until it's been approved.
Appreciate it.
So that could be in that one. I can also send an additional reminder of the annual meeting and a reminder to send any nominations of someone that they would suggest to serve on the committee.
I like that.
And remind me, because my brain is foggy. Did we say retirees would nominate retirees, actives would nominate actives to serve on the committee? What about
Yes.
our poor little citizen reps over there? Who, I mean, we're short one. And where do we get nominations for that?
You
Well,
can ask, that's for sure.
I was gonna say, I think the charter really leaves all of us, including the school board, to identify potential people that would go there. They could serve in that capacity. So it really is open to anyone, and it doesn't necessarily have that election process that the others do, at least as I read the charter or the plan document, excuse me.
Yep, it's more an invitation than it is an election.
So should we still ask for nominations of people? Or
I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure if it's nominations is the
I'm
right
not sure
word,
that's the
but
right word, but
yeah, but like
Suggestions?
suggestions. Yeah, suggestions of someone who might
Could
have
be
some.
interested. Yep.
Yeah. Who wouldn't want to come join our fun?
I think Brad would be a great spokesman for saying how much fun it's been.
Hey, Brad's still on. He hasn't left yet.
We can post a picture of Brad with a full head of hair and say, this is Brad before the advisory committee. This is Brad now. You know, no, I think, but seriously, if you have business associates that you know that would be willing to, and Brad has done an excellent job, and I hope, Brad, that you continue to be willing to serve for us, because you've provided some clarity that I think has been needed, and some rational ways to come about things and explain things in a manner that everybody really understands, and it's been invaluable to this committee. So I will send.
What kind of skill sets do you think this group needs from a community member.
Ideally, I think either someone who has some pension experience of some type, whether it's somebody who is private sector, like employee benefits wise, who does some pension work. Someone with investment background would be helpful. Some of those areas that we frequently discuss and that I think a outside view would be helpful. Anybody else want to add to that of skill sets they think are important?
Sounds fine.
Go.
I can bounce it off of. I think I have some of the actuarial stuff covered, and I can moonlight as an investments guy in this context. But maybe getting some additional investment folks would be interesting. So maybe I can put out some feelers. See what I can come up with.
That's greatly appreciated. I think I'll word it in the letter if anybody has any citizen reps. If they could provide those suggestions, and then nominations for retirees to the retiree group, nominations for the actives to the active group. I'll put out that invitation, and like I said, it will go out next week, and we will plan to meet on October 19th. For that, I would like to maybe have a brief meeting of this group before that, just to make sure we're all comfortable with what's going to be presented at that meeting. What does, trying to look at dates here on my calendar. What does October 12th look like, the week before?
I'm going to be en route to Disney World,
Oh, fun.
but I trust you guys to steer the ship in my stead.
Okay.
October 4th is, or October 12th is fine with me.
Okay. Rosie, can you just send out an invitation
Me
for
too.
the 12th at 4? Does 4 p.m. work for everybody?
Mhm.
Rosie, could you send out an invitation for the 12th at 4 p.m. and if you want to get with me before you send that out, I think we need an updated list. I believe Brad Hudson was still on your list and he needs to be removed.
Okay, will do.
From the invite list. So we'll go ahead and get that set up for the 12th, plan on October 19th for the regular meeting, and hopefully we can get everybody elected as far as the committee and move forward. Is there anything else? I think
I have one quick question.
Uh-huh.
Kathy, when you said the excess earnings information is going to the board, is there like a formal annual report that will go to them as well? And will we get a copy of that?
So the annual report is not going right now. It's not
Okay.
quite ready.
Okay.
It will go in October, and you
Okay.
will get a copy prior to it going out.
Okay, thank you.
We've got the preliminary, all the schedules done for the annual report. Right now it's in the hands of some people in business and finance, making it look more presentable and in a presentation format, and then it will go. So
Okay.
again, you guys, we'll send you guys a copy ahead of time before it goes on the board agenda.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And then I see there's a question in the chat from Blake on setting additional meetings, future meetings. And I, again, fully apologize for the short notice of this meeting. I just wanted to get excess earnings and interest rate done so we could get it to the board. So I can get it on retiree checks and they don't have to get retro interest rates, because that's always a fun process. Do we want to just set a regular cadence of like the second Wednesday of the month at 4 o'clock and just go with it?
Sure.
Sure.
All right, I will have Rosie.
I would say either pick one, or if we wanted to like doodle poll, give a couple choices just to make sure that we don't cadence one where people aren't able to attend. But yes, I would agree.
Okay, let's just pick what now, and if it comes across when you get the meeting invitations that you can't that everybody can't come. If you want to go in now, when you get them and accept or decline based on your current known schedule, that would be great. And then we can get those going. I see Lola's hand up.
Just a question, and I apologize. I wasn't able to get into the meeting. It wouldn't let me in. But anyway, so phase 2, are we still on hold with that, or is it non-existent now?
We are really on big hold on phase 2 because we're not moving on phase 1 right now. And until we have an answer on phase 1, there's no point in doing phase 2.
Okay, thank you.
You are welcome. All right, well, we will get that meeting invite out and plan on the second Wednesday of the month.
Sounds good.
All right, thank you guys. Thank you everybody for your time today.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.